When I turned 25, I realized I was not a fan of the easy love where two lovers live together in peace and harmony. I often wanted to experience the harsh type of love, one that would keep me worried and on my toes. I agree it was a weird thing to desire, but I liked it, and James was the perfect person for my wild romance fantasies. Do like and subscribe. James suffered from intermittent explosive disorder, or IED, which always made him rage even over little things. At the earlier stage of our relationship, I somehow liked this disorder, and silently hoped he never got better, even though he sometimes hoped to get better with the help of therapy sessions. I often made him miss his therapy sessions till it eventually got worse. Things ultimately fell apart when we went to a friend's birthday party together. We got a birthday invite from a high school classmate, but James was reluctant to attend because of his anger issues. I was able to persuade him to attend. On our way there, he got angry over every little thing. The cars honking too much, pedestrians, and my occasional giggle. We finally arrived at the party. It was a duplex booming with hip-hop jams and multicolored neon lights. We headed upstairs and exchanged pleasantries with other guys. We got ourselves a bottle of beer to start with. I saw Tanya at the poolside and I rushed down with excitement to hug her. We engaged in some catch-up conversations. Suddenly, we heard a scream behind us. A guy had fallen from the balcony. Almost everyone inside hurried outside to see. It was the celebrant, fatally injured. One of the witnesses said the victim was pushed off the balcony by another guy during an argument. He also added that the guy who pushed the victim fled after realizing what he had done. I looked around in search of James, but he was nowhere to be found. It was easy to guess that he had done it, and I left the party before the police came with an ambulance. On my way home, Tanya called to tell me the celebrant was in a coma and that the police were already searching for who pushed him. I pulled over at the front of our apartment and found the door open. I ran inside and saw James shaking in the corner of the living room. Immediately he saw me. He jumped out of the corner and locked the door behind me, then hugged me as he sobbed. I could feel his heart beating fast. "What did you do?" I whispered, now fearing the demon I had built. "He was saying annoying words I couldn't tolerate." His wavering voice made me unable to decode what he was saying, but I paid attention. He started talking about how bad my mental disorder had gone, and advised I stay alone on an island to fix myself permanently. "So?" I asked to make him continue talking. "He was implying I'm mad. Am I? He let go and tugged my hand fiercely. "You're fine. You're all right," I reaffirmed to him, and he took a deep breath, then dallied toward the kitchen to pour himself a glass of wine. He became calm shortly after. "How is he asked in a cold voice. "In a coma," I answered. "It's sad, but he deserved it." James gulped the entire glass, then walked to his room. It was at that moment I realized James had become a menace to society, but it never occurred to me that I might someday become a victim. I got a call from a friend the next morning, wanting to know the time James and I left the party. James overheard me when I was taking the call and signaled that I shouldn't answer. So I pretended the network was bad and hung up. "Don't be foolish," he pointed angrily, but it looked cute to me. "Carter would be fine," and I began, and was interrupted. "If Carter gets fine, he'll tell everyone what happened, and I'll be put in jail or a psychiatric hospital," James explained, and I immediately understood. "Then what's your plan?" I asked. "To make sure he doesn't speak," he said, and I could see the familiar rage in his eyes again. How do you want to go about it?" I asked. "Making sure he never talks again," he answered, and walked out of the house. I feared James would try to commit murder, and I wouldn't want him arrested. I did all I could to persuade him not to go, but he still did. He came back a few hours later and complained he wasn't allowed to enter Carter's ward. "How many years would I get if I'm charged?" "Maybe a minimum of 5 years, or life imprisonment," I replied bluntly, and I could tell it only aggravated his intent to kill Carter. The next morning, while we were having breakfast, I could feel the uneasiness in the conversation and asked him what happened. He was reluctant at first, but later revealed it to me as he sliced an apple. He told me he was questioned by the police yesterday when he went to the hospital. I told him I wasn't at the party and you were the only one. He began to shake. They didn't seem to believe me. I could tell as the two officers stared at each other, but they allowed me to leave. We aren't safe. He could barely finish his statement when I heard a knock on the door. He didn't react to the knock and was lost in his thoughts. I opened the door to find a friend at the party and two police officers. "We know he's here," one of them said as they entered. I walked ahead of them, leading them to where James was seated. James quickly apprehended me and placed the knife on my throat, holding me hostage. "Go back!" he shouted at them. But I remained calm, thinking I was just a fake hostage and he wouldn't harm a hair on my head. "Drop the knife and follow us." The police pointed a gun at us. I was more scared of the gun than the knife on my throat. But as soon as I felt relaxed, James pressed the knife on my neck. "I will kill her!" he shouted at the police and kept on pressing the knife to my throat. It wasn't a joke anymore, as blood trickled down my neck to my cleavage. In the nick of time, before he could make a serious cut on my throat, the police officer shot his shoulder and apprehended him. I couldn't deny the responsibility of breeding a monster, and had my share of his brutality. Even before we started dating, I knew Jake was a fitness junkie. Not only was he a member of the local gym, he was also a fitness instructor, and he spent hours upon hours at the gym. He watched everything he ate and counted his calories diligently. It, however, took 2 years of dating to realize just how important fitness was to him. I'd never minded that Jake was ripped, but while he cared too much about staying fit, I was the opposite. I was very much on the thicker side, with big cheeks, belly rolls, and thick arms and thighs. In short, I was fat. But my body shape had never been a problem. I'd been fat when Jake met me, and was duly surprised when he took interest and seemed genuine. There were other girls out there with swimsuit model bods, the kind I imagined every guy hoped for, and they were attracted to him, but he didn't care. He said he loved me, and he did not hold back from showing it. Despite my inhibitions, I fell in love. He told me the shape of my body did not matter. Until it did. Time passed and Jake began to change. I caught him on several occasions looking at me with disgust when he thought I couldn't see him. The way he looked at me, I felt horrible. He began to make subtle jokes about my weight, but I ignored it. He loved me. I was sure he did. Conversations between us steered towards fitness regimens and workout routines and diets, as he not so subtly attempted to tell me that he was displeased by my weight and wanted me to look presentable. It didn't help that I was content with my body, and I turned down his suggestions. He did not like that at all. He stopped holding my hand in public, and when we had sex, which was not as frequent as before, he insisted that the lights be turned off. Eventually, I got fed up and asked if he wanted to break up, as he was not okay with me. The idea did not seem to have occurred to him, because he looked at me like I was crazy and discarded the idea. I did not know he had other things in mind. He invited me to his house out of the blue one day and made dinner for the two of us. I had no idea he had added something in my drink until my sight started to blur and I blacked out a moment later. I awoke with an uncomfortable feeling around my wrists and a numbness in my legs to find that I'd been strung up in a basement, his basement. Jake was there too, sitting on the floor and watching me with longing in his eyes. I begged him to let me go, that I was scared, but he shook his head, telling me that it was for my own good, that he was doing this because he loved me. He came up to me and touched me, caressing my cheeks and my arms and whispering to me. His voice was soft and his voice tender, even as he told me that he'd used my phone to tell everyone that would think to look for me that I'd taken a trip somewhere, and assured me that his alibis were ironclad. It was then I realized he didn't care about the slim women, because he wanted to shape me himself like some twisted creation. For weeks, he starved me, limiting me to one measly meal a day. When I complained, he whipped me. But when he was done, he sat with me, reassuring me that he did it because of love, and I'd be thankful eventually. Weeks turned to months, and I started to submit. I had lost a lot of weight. He let me out of the chains on good behavior, but occasionally whipped me and kept me confined to the basement. One day, he got careless, and I managed to grab hold of a fork when he wasn't looking. I caught him off guard later and rammed it into his neck. I didn't wait to see how much damage I'd caused. I ran away. The police found me out on the street, weak and cold, on the verge of collapsing, and I was taken to a hospital. But when they got back to Jake's house, he was gone, and there was no proof that his basement had been used to hold me hostage for months.
The next thing I heard was the loud siren of the police. I stared at my boyfriend and then back at the body that lay on the floor with anger in me. I slapped my boyfriend Jonathan with every bit of anger that was left in me before the police walked in to take him out. It had been 3 years since I told him that his anger was getting out of hand, and if he wasn't careful, it would lead to the end of many things, including our relationship. But growing up as a guy who only knew violence as the way to correct things, it was hard to change things, and I doubted it was going to be hard to change anything at all since he was now with the police. The night started out like any other night. We had said goodbyes to each other from the video call we had, and just when I was about to sleep, I heard a loud knock on the window, which made me scared for a minute until I realized it was just Jonathan.
For God's sakes, it's 12 o'clock in the morning.
I checked the clock that was on my dressing table for the time.
You should be asleep. You have morning shift tomorrow.
Jonathan looked at me thoroughly, and I could notice his eyes doing a secret glance into my room. I should have known that it was him not being comfortable, that I told him I was going to be home alone tonight. My roommate had to run a night shift at the hospital, which meant I had the house to myself, since I worked at a restaurant and only had to go to work in the morning.
Jonathan, I told you that you need to trust me. All this sneaking in my room at weird hours is not it at all. It's really creepy in case you don't know, and it scares me. You also do it at night, which makes it too crazy to bear sometimes.
He ignored anything I said, and then sat on my bed. He stared at the door for a good 5 minutes before eventually talking. I just wanted to be sure you weren't cheating on me. He looked nonchalant about it and acted like it was a normal thing to just walk into a room at 12 in the morning to be sure his partner wasn't cheating. I ignored him in anger and frustration at correcting him for the 100th time. If he was at least going to change, he could have done it a long time ago. I was just waiting for the perfect time to break up with him. It was hard having to deal with jobs and family at the same time. Talk less of dealing with his own excesses. I had slept for a few minutes when he suddenly woke me up again to ask what I would count as the most stupid question anyone could ever ask. Are you dreaming about another guy? I ignored him and turned to the other side of the bed. It was going to be too much stress answering him. How on earth could I have ended up with someone like him? And it had been 3 years of relationship with not even one break in between. I surprised myself sometimes. A very loud knock on the door woke me up quickly from the sleep that was most engulfing me, and I hissed in annoyance thinking it was Jonathan, just calling attention to himself. And not until Jonathan asked me if I was expecting someone, did I get up from the bed to answer the door. I got scared for a minute before answering the door, because I knew what Jonathan could do if it ended up being a guy. Beating up a guy was not too far from him. I opened the door slightly, and before I knew it or could understand what was going on, the door had been opened ajar, and the guy who stood in front of me, who had barely said anything, was on the floor, fighting for breath. I turned back to see Jonathan, who looked quite happy about what he had done. The look of satisfaction on his face was quite scary, and before I could say anything about it, he used the bottle in his hands again on the guy that was on the floor, already fighting for breath. I pushed him away from the body, and when I inspected who it was Nathan, my roommate's boyfriend. I called his name severally for him to wake up, but it was good as nothing trying to wake him up. He was dead. I turned around to see Jonathan with no look of remorse on his face, and without questioning or even trying to understand it, I walked past him to get my phone. I could not control it anymore. It was beyond me. I dialed the police on the phone and gave them the information, sneakily, just so Jonathan wouldn't know I was calling the police on him. He was going to kill me before I could even tell them what I wanted to, because it was obvious he had no mercy in him for people all in the name of love. How stupid that just sounded. Still in the process of trying to wake up Nathan as much as I could, Jonathan still stood there, telling me not to touch him because it meant I was cheating on him and would do more if the guy was still alive. I stared at him in disbelief before crying all over again. How could I have gotten myself into a mess as crazy as this? A few minutes later, the police arrived, and that was when half of the neighborhood woke up to check what was going on that could have warranted the attention of the police. Who wouldn't be worried if they suddenly heard the police at 1 o'clock in the morning? My roommate kept calling me. She probably had heard about the siren and wanted to ask if I was okay. How could I begin to explain that I was really okay and it affected her more than me? How? Jonathan looked at me in confusion when the police arrived, and just when he raised his hands to pull me closer to himself forcefully, all in the name of love or questioning, I moved away from him until the police arrived to handcuff him. I felt relieved for a while, but couldn't ignore the heaviness in my heart at the death of Nathan, and considering the fact that I would be the one to tell my roommate what happened and why it happened. She was going to hate me. I walked back into my room gently after everything went down and the whole neighborhood was quiet again. I couldn't sleep again in fear of Jonathan somehow reappearing to punish me for what I did. But amidst everything that happened, I had only one question in my mind. How exactly did I meet him? I turned and tossed in my bed for the answer to the question, and another one popped up. Why on earth did I meet him? I hated myself at the moment. Why? Why?
Hollywood is great and makes almost all girls believe in a love that's perfect, true, and without blemish. With this mindset, I said yes to Costello with the hope that he was going to be as perfect as my favorite Disney princess. The first week of the relationship was nothing less than perfect because he was protective, always ensuring that I was safe, and with guards everywhere I went just so he wouldn't hear anything that went wrong for some reason. Life was good, relationship was good, I loved love, and because of Costello, I made sure to keep loving love. Costello was a rich guy, always showering me with gifts and anything I said I wanted without taking a long pause to think about it. He was that amazing. Though I had not met anyone who I could say was his family, and he didn't talk about them as well, I didn't bother asking because I didn't want to feel like I was pressuring him to tell me things that he probably wasn't comfortable about or things he just wasn't ready to say. Get dressed, Mamacita. Wear your second best dress. I want you to save your best dress for the future. Something amazing is coming up, he said in a seductive voice over the phone. I loved the way he talked to me and the way he made me feel on top of the world. I'll pick you up in 2 hours, he said before hanging up. I had to be dressed perfectly or almost perfect since he wanted me to save the best for another day. I spent about 40 minutes on my makeup after having my bath. I checked the time I had and I had about 30 minutes to myself before he showed up. I sat quietly opposite the mirror, a big smile on my face unconsciously, and when I went back to my consciousness, Costello's name displayed with love emojis on my phone screen. I'm outside, Mamacita, he said sharply and hung up immediately. I checked the phone to be sure that he really hung up. Why? I picked up my bag and went out immediately to be sure everything was fine. He even came minutes early, which was weird because he always came at the exact time that he said. His black Bugatti La Voiture Noire shone brightly in the dark even without a light, and I knew that despite the fact that I actually loved Costello as a person, I loved his money as well. He was rich, wealthy, and I loved wealth and riches. Good combination if you asked me. He was quiet throughout the drive and only said a few words to whatever questions I asked. Poppy? I placed his free hand into mine and he pulled it away almost immediately, not making eye contact. I repeated the same action and he did the same thing again. What's wrong? I asked him sadly, but he said nothing. I kept quiet after that. This was probably a prank for where he was taking me. Different thoughts raced through my mind as I tried to understand what was going on with him. His phone rang, and with a number that had no caller ID. He picked it up and only said 2 words to the person on the other line before hanging up. "Almost there." He took a sharp turn to the right after the call towards an unfamiliar route. I asked him what was going on, but he still refused to say anything and only focused on his driving. The road was dark, quiet, and smelled of alcohol, cigarettes, and stale blood. He smirked in an evil manner as he drove further into the road. I kept asking him questions, and he continued being silent until he parked the car in the middle of the road. I tried to open the door, something I felt I should have done before we got that far in the road. The door was stuck, and no matter how much I tried to open it, it wouldn't open. I begged him quietly and then loudly, but he didn't hear anything I said. He got down from the car and then locked it. He went ahead to talk to someone who came out of nowhere. Costello kept pointing at me as he talked to the person. The person nodded as he told him things I couldn't hear. I got scared. Anything could happen because I didn't know what they could be planning for me. I tried to open the door again, but it didn't even move. My heart skipped a beat as the person Costello was talking to approached me slowly, and Costello walked into the dark. I guessed that a house was there, but I couldn't see it, which would explain where the other person came from. The person got to the door and opened the door, and I began struggling so hard to open easily. He placed a bag over my head before I could see my face and tied my hands and legs amidst my struggle to stop him. He removed the paper bag and placed a tape over my lips before quickly covering my face again, carefully enough so that I wouldn't notice his face. He carried me over his shoulders and walked towards an area that I couldn't use just my ears to discern. After a few minutes, he dropped me on the floor like I was a lifeless body. I screamed at the pain from the fall before hoping that even though Costello was one of them, he would still somehow save me from them. He says he loves me. I know he does, I thought to myself, and I used it to assure myself that nothing was going to happen. This is how far I can go, I heard Costello's voice, and then I didn't hear it again. I waited patiently to hear his voice again, but it didn't come. Everywhere was as silent as night, and I began to cry, begging them to show me mercy and just let me go, and would never say anything about any of this. They laughed at me. They told me I was a fool and just accept my fate, accepting whatever was going to come. I whimpered at every slight movement I felt towards me and calmed down again when I felt it all away from me, and it continued until someone eventually lifted me up from the floor and carried me over his shoulder again. I couldn't even beg whoever it was anymore. I was already tired from all the energy I'd burned while crying and begging them earlier. A familiar scent was picking up my nose. Costello? He was still there. Something in me made me happy at the thought that even though he was torturing me, the person that carried me removed the paper bag from my face and then the tape before taking off the ropes off my hands and my legs. I saw his face clearly, eventually, and a big smile was plastered on his face. The road became bright all of a sudden, and I saw Costello on the other side of his car laughing so hard. What's so funny to him? I was annoyed, waiting for him to explain what exactly was funny. He spoke up eventually, and I stared at him in disbelief. "April Fools," he said and pointed at me while still laughing hard. I picked up my bag from his car and left, but not before yelling at him, "Damn you, Costello."